us. Again, sorry about the last minute menu change, but for some people it looks like it has worked out to their advantage. So we'll go ahead and get started. And like I was telling a few people earlier, I'm kind of a high energy guy, so if you guys feel free to kind of meet me there, that'd be awesome. Or if you have questions or anything, we'll have some time at the end, but I do have a story for us here. And I'm going to wear like a lapel mic here. We're going to try and capture some audio and video tonight. And so hopefully, there was also this. Do you want me to use the, can you guys hear me? Do you want me to try to use the speaker or anything like that? But pretty much so, basically what Diane already said, a disclaimer. So this is not supposed to be a substitute for any medical counseling. So one thing I'll mention, so brief story, we got a lot of cords up here. I am a doctor of chiropractic, a state licensed doctor of chiropractic over on the east side of Michigan, right? So we're over there in Canton. And this is, I think we have a photo of our clinic here, if it'll come up. But yeah, so I practice spinal chiropractic adjustments, and I pair that with lifestyle nutritional medicine as a way to help people increase their resiliency, and in some cases actually restore them back to health. This is my wife. So this is us in the state of Tennessee, hanging out in the, sorry? So, we really enjoy spending time together, being outside and hiking on the trails. So that's us there. This is our world headquarters, as I like to call it. This is our office in Canton. So we have a suite over here in the corner. And like I said, we do old school, traditional, hands-on, comfortable, gentle, specific adjustments for people. And then we elevate the profession of chiropractic more from just pop and pray to, hey, how can we help out with all these other things that are going on? So one thing I'll mention is that assessment form that you have in front of you. Feel free to work through that as we're talking here. And if you would like, you're more than welcome. I think everyone has a business card. You can take a photo of that form and the results and basically shoot it over to me. You can text the office number. You can take a photo, text that photo to our office number, and we can get back to you and discuss the results or the practical application of what these subjective forms are basically saying. So that's open to you as well. And I think there's a little bit of a delay with our internet connection, so apologies for that. But we got a lot to go through, so kind of hang tight with us here. And I like to, they say clarify your message so that people will listen. So I really want to distill down a lot of complicated information and make it accessible and easy to understand. So we're going to be talking a lot about autoimmunity tonight and how that relates to a signaling molecule called zonulin. Okay, if you guys have heard of zonulin before. And we're going to also wrap that up at the very end and how that relates to the gut-brain axis. So this is the story of zonulin, as I like to describe it. Has anyone seen this NPR video on YouTube about the microbiome? Great video. If you guys are taking notes or if you guys like YouTube, so you can search for, it's called The Invisible Universe, if off the top of my head. It's a video by NPR. It's great for kids, too, to really engage. It's an animation. Great for kids to really connect with this information about the microbiome in their gut. But basically, the way they illustrate this here is that our microbiome comes from mom. So it comes from coming down the birth canal as this little guy is here. But then one of their points is that due to the rising rates of cesarean sections and the decrease of natural births, so some kids are having, call it what you want, you can't necessarily say causation, but you might actually look at correlation between a lot of the cognitive impairments, a lot of the cognitive challenges that kids are having these days because perhaps they were removed from having that natural birth experience. So working our way through here, we talk about the human barriers. Okay, so zooming out here, big picture, there are 6 barriers. We're going to focus on the bottom 4 here tonight, if you will. Not so much on the blood-brain barrier, but that does relate in a major way. That might be a discussion for another talk sometime. But to our right here, this is a great photo. This is an illustration here of our epithelial cell lining in our gut. right? Can everyone see? Am I in the way? So this is our gut epithelial lining, and a lot of the research on zonulin has focused on why this is either a permeable membrane, a semi-permeable membrane, or whether this should be a completely locked junctional area. So even to zoom out even further, the whole idea here is that we have everything interfacing from our environment. So if something comes in our mouth, it's going to eventually interface with these cells here in the colon, okay? But if your colon is leaky, so leaky gut, intestinal permeability, then those macromolecules are going to be getting through those cell layers, and we'll talk more about that too, into your bloodstream, all right? Which then can activate your immune system, which then can cause adaptive physiologic change in a dysfunctional pattern, which is not good, or disease, if you will, or autoimmunity, or rashes on your skin. Pretty much you name it, and it can likely be traced back to your gut, which is cool because everyone here is all about eating great food, right? Natural, healthy food. Just eat real food, the JERF little acronym. So, awesome. So, has anyone seen The Matrix? Any movie buffs? Yeah, so we got one person. Awesome. So The Matrix, Neo, so Keanu Reeves, right? Man, no one else seen The Matrix? Temet Noske, yeah, okay, so Temet Noske, Know Thyself. This is where he goes to see the shaman, right? And he's like, I don't know who I am. I don't think I have what it takes. And she's like, no, you got this. You can dodge bullets, right? So Temet Noske's Know Thyself. So that's a big theme. It's all about our body has to know itself in order to not attack itself, right? So again, just conveying big ideas, big concepts here to kind of get us some more context and launched off. So internet, and try it again. If this turns out to be really annoying, I might just go to manual and do it that way, which I think I might because that's too long. All right, so a couple of research things here for you. We're going to have these kind of interspersed throughout, but this is from James Neuenschwander. The immune system is designed to protect us against infections from the outside world, assist in the repair of injury, and destroy any abnormal cells that are created. In order to do this properly, the immune system must be able to discern self from non-self. Again, that's from 2013. Immune tolerance. Okay, so this is the tolerance of our immune system. I think it's because I get close to that thing. The immune system's ability to know what to attack and what to leave alone. All right, so we don't want our immune system attacking our thyroid because our thyroid is us. Makes sense? We don't want our immune system attacking our stomach or our pancreas, right? Or any other cell that we have that is us, okay? But we do want our immune system to attack viruses, antigens, pathogenic bacteria, stealth organisms. So the question here is, how do we get immune tolerance? All right, this is cool. So this begins at birth. So this is my mom right here. Go mom. For those of you who don't know, Mother's Day is May 12th. Who's a mother here? Anyone have kids or moms? Awesome. So make sure everyone honors their mother for Mother's Day coming up next month here in about 4 weeks. Get your Mother's Day card and your flowers, all right? But moms do a lot. Not only do they bring us up and train us in the right ways of living and interacting with people in the world, but they also give us our immune tolerance, okay? And how does that happen? Well, one, we come down the birth canal, ideally. And then the other way is through breast milk, through nursing, again, ideally. I know a lot of things come up with that, but there is this major, major emphasis on nursing, on breastfeeding when it comes to our immune system, okay, and the education of our immune system, because we'll talk more about that later here too. Breastfeeding versus formula, vaccinations affecting the microbiome. We're not going to go into that as much, but that's a major factor too. If you're taking notes, and if you're like me, you like the YouTube videos, so as we mentioned earlier, The Invisible Universe of the Microbiome from NPR, that's this guy over here on the right, and on the left is a TED Talk from Caltech. I know this is hard to read, guys. Don't worry, we can send out the notes. You can look it up later. However, this is Elaine Hishayo, Elaine Hishayo. The mind-altering microbiome, how the microbiome affects brain and behavior. that is a really interesting 6-minute video that you might want to check out. Great, so we'll go ahead. 6 months to 1 year to develop the system or peripheral tolerance. Okay, so ideally, that's how long kids are nursing, right? Some longer than others. But ideally, that's how long it takes to really develop our entire immune system. Awesome. So, oral tolerance in neonates. This is Nature. This is 2010, From Basics to Prevention, Potential Prevention of Allergic Disease. The main point here is that defective oral tolerance can lead to gut inflammatory disease, food allergies, celiac disease, and autoimmunities. Again, guys, 2010. This stuff has been around for a minute. Like, this is not new, 2018, 2019. All right, so more on breastfeeding. So let's start with the arrows. Whenever you see the arrows on the Prezi here, follow the arrows. So we start at the top. An environmental antigen enters the mother. So let's call that gluten. Mom has a bagel, or mom has you name it, a piece of bread. All right, and that antigen handling by the maternal digestive milk enters the baby's system. Okay, the system enters into the milk. All right, and then nursing, and then that antigen is transferred across the baby's gut barrier, and then the baby develops tolerance based on what mom is eating. We tracking? Does that make sense? So that's kind of like a rough immunology of why nursing is so effective and important. Okay. We'll talk more about what maternal milk contains, but it is a ton of immune information. Has anyone heard of human milk oligosaccharides, or HMOs? So what they've done is they've isolated 2 specific sugars. One of them is 2'-fructosilactose, and they've actually said, hey, this sugar, specifically this carbohydrate, helps babies develop the bifidobacterium, which is what they need in their gut when they're a baby. So let me say it again. This specific carbohydrate, the babies get that from mother's milk, and then that helps their microbiome grow, specifically the bifidobacterium. So the cool application is, now let's say someone's having those neurocognitive challenges, okay? And they're no longer able to nurse or breastfeed or something like that. Or mom dries up, or name a complication, right? Or even if you're an adult and you want to get a stronger microbiome and gut. They have this not commercially, but this is in a product now. It is the Metagenics Ultra GI Replenish, for those of you who are like up on your products and things like that. So Aristo Voice Johnny here says breastfeeding is becoming one of the most important factors in the induction of oral tolerance. Awesome. So like I said, oligosaccharides, inactive enzymes. What else is in breast milk? Proteins, complex carbohydrates. There's that 2'-FL that we just talked about. Also, this is a great video, human milk oligosaccharides. You can Google that one. Great animation about exactly what we're talking about. So if you have patients, or if you have, so again, people present to the office as patients, so I'll talk in that language. Mother comes in, her baby's having a hard time, and was this a natural birth or was this a cesarean section? How'd that go? Oh, yep, so this is a cesarean section. So this might be a case where we recommend using that Ultra GI Replenish. So it's a powder. It's great. You can just mix it up with whatever water, filtered water, almond milk, coconut milk, whatever you like. Factors that can disrupt oral tolerance. Maternal exposure to xenobiotics, mother's diet, baby formula or protein, hydrolysate formula, digestive enzyme population, gut microbiota. Stress can affect it. Time of the introduction of solid food, use of drugs or medications. So if mom is taking an SSRI because she's sad or anxious or depressed, and other xenobiotics, your genetics can actually affect that oral tolerance as well. One quick note about genetics. This is something that I'm getting into more now recently. Have you guys heard of 23andMe? Have you guys heard of Ancestry? I like Ancestry. I just did it on myself. It's pretty cool. What you can do is actually you can do the Ancestry DNA test for about $100 there. Then you can download the raw data, which is really cool. So if you're like binary code, like zeros and ones, like CDs and all that, right? So it's basically stuff like that. It's the raw data. You download the raw data from Ancestry, you upload it into something called the Sterling's app, which is pretty cool. And for only $129 later, you get like 700,000 genetic SNPs. or single nucleotide proteins, SNPs, right? So that's been really cool, especially for people who are like, hey doc, I think I have a methylation issue or a detoxification issue or a sulfation issue. The way to test those is by looking at the genetics. Now, again, we're all about epigenetics, right? So not that your genes define who you are and things like that, but if you have a problem on your COMT or your C677T with methylation and your body has trouble methylating, then yeah, I'm going to tell you to take methylated folic acid, right? But again, our lifestyle, what does Chestnut say? You are the genetic expression of your lifestyle choice. So your genes don't necessarily define you. However, it's kind of cool to look at them and try and tailor that to our nutrition. So this is actually my report. So surprise, surprise, I am 48% Eastern European and Russian. Even further than that, further refined Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Lithuania. And I think there's a little thing right down there, like that's where most of my genetic material comes from, according to Ancestry, which is kind of cool. You can do some family digging with these things. But like I said, this is where the magic happens for me. You get to look at all these SNPs and then correlate that to how you live, essentially. And that's where I like to look at these genes and then also consult with patients on that. So can everyone see that? So this is the raw data from Sterling's app that you would get after you do your Ancestry, your 23andMe, or something like that. So cool. I think I just have to stand closer. All right. So we get our immune system from mom. Check. All right, and we continue to get our immune information cells from mom. Okay, so we tracking so far? We're following the narrative? Great, so now what? So are we good? Well, not really. Our immune cells need education. They need training. All right, so here are some cells who are training. These are some great human beings here. We'll use their gym names to protect their identity. So this is G Money over here, and this guy is Major Pump is his name at the gym. And so you can tell that he's been on mother's milk for a little bit longer because this guy is just jacked and huge, right? So we like to give him a hard time about that. We don't actually know, but he is pretty strong. All right. Stand closer. Yeah, I think it's just a reception thing. Okay. So let's talk about the training or that education that our cells need. So the narrative here goes something like this. They start in the bone marrow, so they're birthed in the bone marrow. Okay, our immune cells come from our bone marrow. Okay, then they go to kindergarten, which is the thymus. So they're really cute in kindergarten. They're like running around. They're having a great time. They're about 4 or 5, and they're just wonderful little immune cells. Okay, then they go to elementary school. All right, so this is where the systemic circulation and the lymph nodes. All right, so the story here is. They're getting older, they're learning more about life, they're starting to, get more ornery and things like that. They won't pick up their room, they won't go to bed on time, things like that, right? Then they get to high school, which is the targeted organs, the skin and the lungs and the intestines, okay? This is where they just rebel. They're like, mom and dad suck, this is really lame, what's the meaning of life anyways? And they just kind of go all existential on you, right? Finally, they go back to mom and dad and say, hey, I want to go to university, I want to go to school. Okay, so that happens. Phenotype plasticity comes from one phenotype to another. So that's where you get into differentiation between Th1 and Th2 immune types. Okay, so a lot there. Again, I can send you guys this. It's kind of hard to read on the screen. But this is really cool in terms of the progression that comes from the original T cells all the way to their maturation here. All right, so if the immune system is supposed to leave self alone and attack non-self, like we said, bacteria, viruses, fungus, parasites, this is the process of immune tolerance, the immune system's ability to know what to attack and when and what to leave alone, like we've been saying. Okay, so this is Aristo Vojdani. Let's see, Alternative Therapeutic Health Medicine, 2015. Indeed, individuals in whom the immune exclusion mechanism does not function may experience chronic hyperabsorption of macromolecules, like we talked about earlier, and the tendency to develop autoantibodies and even autoimmune disease. Disorders associated with increased intestinal permeability. So basically, you name it, it probably relates back to your gut, okay? Who here thinks they have some kind of gut digestive thing going on? Issue. I mean, you name it, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, you know, it probably goes back to the gut. So that's why I love talking about this, because it's so foundational and fundamental in terms of addressing a number of conditions. And we're actually finding mechanisms in the literature, okay, that go to a lot of other conditions where we had previously thought, like, what does that have to do with the gut? Or what does that have to do with autoimmunity, you know? But now we're proving it with this really cool testing that's out there. We tracking? All right, so again, big picture, you have defective tolerance, defective oral tolerance, which leads to gut inflammation, which leads to enhanced gut permeability, which leads to food immune reactivities and autoimmunities. These numbers are a little old, correct me if I'm wrong. Autoimmune disease affects 53 million Americans per year, which is roughly 10% of the world's population. So again, this affects a lot of people, all right? We need more health practitioners out there who know how to do some of what we're talking about, because it affects so many people. Or at least be aware of the models and aware of the mechanisms, right? Okay, Doc, enough already. We get it. What about Zonulin, LPS, and actomycin? Who are my Calvin and Hobbes fans? Anyone read the comics? Yeah? Awesome. Great. All right. Every time I walk over here, I have a hard time. There we go. All right, so what is Zonulin? Who's heard of Zonulin? Who's like, what's he talking about? Like, you know, like some Star Trek thing?
That's why you came.
That's why you came. Great. Awesome. So Zonulin is a signaling molecule, okay? So this molecule, we're talking about the tight junction here. We're going to talk more about that later. We're talking about, so again, this is our epithelial layer here, right? These cells, so cell, 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 all right? These black lines, the tight junctions, that's what we're talking about here. That's zonulin, occludin, there's others probably that we're discovering, all right? But we've known about zonulin, we've known about occludin for a while, okay? So this is one of the junctions. There's 3 main junctions that keep these cells kind of like together, like next to each other, right? Okay, so now let's talk about the 2 different ways that stuff gets through those epithelial cells into our bloodstream, into our circulation, right? And I'm moving around a lot. I'm getting hot. Might have to take my jacket. All right, so there's the transcellular pathway, okay? And then there's the paracellular pathway. Can you guys appreciate that? Can you see the difference? So the paracellular pathway is between the cells, and the transcellular pathway just goes wham right through it, okay? So why is that important? Well, both of them are clinically indicated because it'd be helpful if you knew which one it was, right? That way you could augment your treatment to get better clinical effectiveness, all right? So let's see, what else can we talk about? So this stuff, we'll talk more about the testing down here, but I really just want to illustrate that for you guys here. You see the red, blue, and the green? That's called the adherence junction. Who's heard of the adherence junction? Cool, awesome, yes, well, obviously. So we'll talk more about the adherence junction later, but here's something that's really kind of cool as well. Let's really try, man, Melissa's going to tell me I have like 2 minutes left when I have like so much more to talk about. Okay, our body knows when to open these cells and when to not open these cells, okay? It's smart like that, okay? Call it innate intelligence, call it whatever you want, all right? But here's the whole idea. We're now learning that sometimes our body wants to get rid of something. Let's say we have some kind of food that doesn't agree with us. And we're like, we need to get that thing out of here like right now. So the body will open up these cells to get it into the bloodstream to just flush it out as fast as possible, okay? Rather than keep it in the colon where it can do tons more damage, all right? Conversely, or also, the body will keep those closed intentionally, okay? So it's called selective, who's heard of selective hearing? You ever talk to a loved one or talk to your husband or whoever, and you know they don't hear what you're saying? They have selective hearing. They either want to listen to you or they don't. So this is selective permeability. I'm really proud of myself. I just thought that up. Selective permeability, okay? So our gut is innately designed to be selectively permeable, which is really cool. All right, so when you ask the question, okay, doc, what initiates the release of zonulin? So when zonulin is released to actually open the gut lining, the answer is we don't really know, sort of. So that's our next slide. Okay. So what triggers zonulin activity? So if you want the best answer possible, who's got an iPhone or an Android or a smartphone or access to the internet? Cool. Yeah. So you can actually, if you guys listen to podcasts, are you guys like podcast people? Radio people? Yeah. So great. So we have a Michigan Family Wellness podcast, and I would invite you guys to check out one of our most recent episodes, episode 60. This is with actually Dr. Elroy Vojtjani, this handsome guy right here. And if you recognize that last name, it's because Dr. Elroy is Aristo's son. So there's kind of like a family thing going on there, which is really cool. Also, a fun note, this guy right here has like +7 strength points because he recently became a dad. So it's called dad strength. Have you guys heard of that? Have you heard of like old man strength? Like when you're an old man, you're just sitting around in your chair, but you're like strong as an ox. Okay, all right, so maybe just me. All right, so, but yeah, this guy just had a baby, so kudos to him. But like I said, check out this interview for this really in-depth discussion on what triggers zonulin, because really, we don't really know yet. There's only been 3 things in the literature that have been proven to show that they influence the zonulin release. Those are gluten peptides, so your glutens, your gliadins, all those gluten proteins. Dysbiosis, which is just your imbalance of your microbiome. So specifically, if you guys have heard of LPS or lipopolysaccharides, we'll talk more about that. Glyphosate, Roundup, alcohol, NSAIDs, cosmetics, basically you name it that can cause dysbiosis, that can release zonulin. The third one is called cytolethal distending toxins, or CDTs. Who's heard of a CDT? I don't really know what other context would be a CDT. All right, but here's the big point. These gram-negative bacteria, it's like we kind of need them, but they kind of also can really wreak havoc on our health, right? So they can cause, the gram-negative bacteria can release the endotoxin LPS, but they can also release what's called cytolethal distending toxins, which can really mess us up, which is not good. So like I said, check out the, sorry, go ahead. What podcast number was that? Yeah, I believe it's number 60. It's one of our most recent ones. It's probably the last 2 or 3. But if you guys have Spotify, if you guys have the podcast app for Apple, or if you're a Google person, I think it's called Google Podcasts, we're on there. But definitely check this out. This is a great interview from one of the leaders in the quote-unquote functional medicine world right now. So pretty cool. Absolutely. So that's the thing. It's like, is leaky gut a bad thing? So it's like, oh, I got leaky gut. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly bad if you understand selective permeability. So going back to zonulin is designed to open the epithelial layer when the body wants to, with purpose and conviction, right? I like that language. Maintains oral tolerance for the immune system to identify self from non-self. So going back to what we were talking about earlier. Let's see. So again, more immunology in the breast milk there, which we covered, and then moving into the dysregulation of peripheral tolerance. Okay, so let's say again, we've got food and microbes and just all the bad stuff coming through, and it's unregulated and it's just havoc, right? That's what makes us sick. That's what leads to dysregulation of the peripheral tolerance. Have you ever said like, okay, it doesn't matter what I eat, I get a rash, or it doesn't matter what I eat, I get a headache? Okay, I hear people tell me this all the time. All right, I just had a patient text me. It's like she's trying to eat healthy. She's trying to watch what she eats, but whatever she eats, like she's reactive to everything. This is probably why, Or have you guys heard of the ALCAT testing? We'll talk more about that in a sec. Zonulin research gives us a new perspective. So you guys can check that out. Dr. Elroy Vojtjani, that's one of his quotes from the podcast. But again, whenever you see arrows in the Prezi, follow the arrows, right? So zonulin is released in the gut, which leads to now you have zonulin entering the bloodstream. Again, if we have one of those pathways involved, either the trans pathway or the paracellular pathway, or both. And then serum zonulin levels, so that's just serum that's in your blood, serum zonulin will increase, okay? What's the cool thing about zonulin? Well, zonulin is really big, all right? It's a big 47,000 Daltons, all right? So what does that mean, Doc? Okay, well, that means if you're trying to measure, because what does Dr. George Goodhart say? Measure, 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 right? You always want to measure. If you're trying to measure serum zonulin, that's tough because it doesn't hang around very long, okay? It's big. Your liver clears it out, all right? So what they've done is, you guys ever like high school math? I know that was probably like a while ago, but it's like, calculate the regression curve, like R2. So you pull out your TI-83 plus and you punch in all the formulas, or maybe you do it by hand, right? So my point here is, look at the blue and then look at the red and green. Which one seems more organized, rather than like a random, shot from my 12 gauge? Yeah, red and green. Awesome. So yeah, the whole point here is it's hard to really determine a pattern here. This is the serum zonulin. What are these? Well, these are actually the antibodies, right? So the antibodies are showing to be much more stable over a longer period of time versus the serum levels of zonulin, which are all over the place depending on the patient. Okay, so that's the big idea here. And again, this is from the, we're going to look at this more too, Vojdani et al. World Gastroenterology 2017. So that's the most recent that we've shown so far, 2017. So if testing serum zonulin, so levels in the blood, is not a reliable or suitable method for clinical accuracy, what can we test that is reliable and effective for clinical application? That's right, you guessed it, it's the antibodies, right? So the immunoglobulins. Are we tracking? Kind of following the story? Cool. And here it is in black and white. Well, lots of color actually. So World of Gastroenterology 2017. A couple years ago, and so fluctuation of zonulin levels in blood versus stability of the antibodies, and there he is as well, my good buddy Datis. I'm not actually friends with him, I've read his books, really smart. Due to its fluctuation, a single measurement of zonulin level is not recommended for the assessment of intestinal barrier integrity. So if you go to a doc or a practitioner and say, Doc, I think I have leaky gut, and they say, well, let's test your serum zonulin. You should say, no, let's test the antibodies, because that's the clinically relevant thing to test. So measurement of IgG and IgA antibodies against zonulin, occludin, all these other proteins, and other tight junction proteins is proposed for the evaluation of the loss of intestinal barrier integrity. What else does this article say? Lots of things cast doubt on the reliability of the biomarkers, yada, yada, yada. I want to get more to in the sake of time. Let's see. This was demonstrated in a large percentage of patients with celiac disease. Who knows about celiac disease? Who knows someone who has celiac disease? Yeah. So showed a significant elevations in antibodies against zonulin and other tight junction proteins, as opposed to measurements of just the zonulin level or the blood serum level. And finally here, important diagnostic tool, detection of intestinal hyperpermeability in patients with inflammatory disorders and autoimmune disease. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this already. I do want to just mention, so ALCAT testing, it's like, hey, great. It's not really getting to the root cause. So maybe you've done the ALCAT, maybe you've know someone who's done it. It's good information, sort of, but it's like a photograph. It's like only in that immediate time. Because I have people who tell me this too. Doc, I did the ALCAT, and gluten came up, and so I cut gluten out of my diet. Great. So you eliminated the problem, okay? So you're taking the protein, you're taking the food out of the equation, all right? But then you replace it with, let's say, avocados. Okay, well, avocados are great. It's a source of fat. They have all these vitamins and proteins. 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, whatever it is, now that same person is having a reaction to the avocados, okay? So it doesn't matter what food, insert whatever food you want, but the principle is, if you're not fixing the gut at the zonulin level, at the level of the epithelial cells, eventually, over time, it doesn't matter what food you eat, you're going to have a reaction. Your immune system is going to build up. It's going to lose tolerance. TILT, if you've heard the acronym TILT, toxic-induced loss of tolerance. If you've heard of oral tolerance, that's what we're all talking about here, is we have to restore the tolerance of our immune system, which means we have to really fix the gut at this base level. We tracking? So again, tight junctions here, that's what we're talking about. Zonulin, this is the actomyosin network. This is the adherence junction down here. Let's see, LPS, we're going to talk about that too. But for those of you who maybe have picked up, this is actually a test that we can run. This is a blood test. Awesome. So I got to really scoot here. Okay. This is to show how we form the antibodies. Okay. So the antibody final thing is down here on the left. All right. So we have everything going through the cells. Okay. Picking up all the zonulin, the occludin, everything. All right. They attach to what's called the APC, the antigen presenting cell, which then gives information to the T cell, and then the B cell, and the plasma cell finally helps to make those antibodies. Okay, we tracking there? I'm kind of gloss over that because that's more deep immunology that we don't really have time to go into. Major diseases associated to zonulin, or if you've seen in the literature, it's called pre-HP2 biomarker. Okay, so autoimmune disease. Who's got rheumatoid arthritis, or who's heard of rheumatoid arthritis? Celiac disease, AS, ankylosing spondylitis, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, SLE, lupus. You guys heard of lupus? Type 1 diabetes. Here are all the cancers that have been shown to be associated with zonulin. So you got your brain cancers, breast cancers, lung adenocarcinomas, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer. Diseases of the central nervous system. Chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, MS, multiple sclerosis, and even schizophrenia. So we'll talk more about that in a second here too. You guys, this is so common, okay? This kind of person, again, I hate to pick on like middle-aged women, but that's honestly who this affects, and that's honestly who we work a lot with. But this really is how everything, you have a breakdown of this barrier system here, which leads to food allergen intolerance, immune system abnormalities, and autoimmune diseases. But they don't walk in and tell you all this. What do they walk in and tell you? Hey doc, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm on an SSRI, a benzodiazepine, and you name it, right? And I can't sleep, I'm anxious, I have physical pain. So that's often why they come to a chiropractor, right? Is, hey doc, I have pain. My back hurts, I have headaches. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's adjust your back, but then let's figure out why you have such physical pain and actually fix that. And again, this is why I'm so passionate about this work, guys, is it comes down to this. These people feel hopeless. And when you can instill hope back into someone, you change their life. Like, that's huge. All right, so forgive me if I get a little riled up about it because it's just real life. Again, all these things contribute to the breakdown of this intestinal permeability here, okay? Food coloring, lectins, agglutinins, undigested food, inflammatory cytokines, medications, stress, dysbiosis in our gut microbiome, toxic chemicals. We were talking about plastics earlier. That's a big one. I'm going to have to really speed it up here, guys, because we're running low on time. But this is an example of one of our patients, actually, that we've run this test on. All right. I actually like to see this number a little bit lower. So it's arguably that there are components here of all three kinds of things that we're looking for on this test, okay? One major practical application is have you guys heard of Serum Bovine Immunoglobulins? So one of the tools that we have, this is brand new, we didn't have this back in like 2010 when a lot of this research was coming out. We now have the ability to give someone immunoglobulins in a way that's available to perhaps practitioners like me who are outside of the hospital context, right? Because I'm not in a hospital, versus like you're in a hospital and they're giving you an IV, immunoglobulin drip. But this is one of the things, this is called SBI from Orthomolecular. Great thing, I've had clinical success with it. You got to dose it high, it's expensive, but it works. We could talk a lot about that too. So we know a lot about zonulin, but what about the GPS thing? The LPS thing. All right, so LPS is called lipopolysaccharides from gram-negative bacteria, okay? This stuff will make you sick. As you can see, it affects a lot of different things. So if your immune system is forming antibodies to LPS, it can affect your thyroid, your joints, your heart, your immune system, your liver, your brain, your lungs, and contribute to metabolic disorders. Again, lots of stuff here. I wish I had more time to really go in depth here. But similar type thing with Zonulin. So LPS serum is also not very stable in the blood. It only lasts about 2 to 4 minutes, but the antibodies stick around for a long time, all right? LPS antibodies tell you that it's been present for at least the last 4 to 6 weeks, and the antibodies are stable much longer, which means they're much more practical for laboratory testing. I'm going to swim past this research here. Lots of really good research to substantiate what we're saying. It's affecting a lot of things here. Everything from babies to the gut microbiome here, the intestinal permeability, the blood-brain barrier, leptin transport. So if you guys have heard of Dr. Lustig and what causes leptin resistance. What else here? Systemic LPS causes chronic neuroinflammation and progressive neurodegeneration. So it's affecting our brains as well. This is the thing that I've seen clinically also. Well, we talked about this in terms of it disappearing from blood circulation, but LPS is really involved in mood and depression and feeling down. Okay, so if you're always feeling down, you've been on an SRI or a benzodiazepine or a D2 blocker, whatever it is, or even those SNRIs, which are even more intense in my opinion, then you might want to consider that LPS may be involved. Okay, this is more so for the clinician, but you can see it, as things come back positive, you can read the clinical interpretation and then the clinical approach. And what I'm finding is more often than not, a lot of people have they have both mechanisms of transport. They have a lot of things coming back positive, and you got to throw everything you can at them in a mindful way. Oh, yeah. Will it work? Gotta fix our volume here. Did our speaker turn off? Oh, our speaker turned off. I'm sorry, guys. So sing along if you know the words.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Working upward and freezing and closing.
Sorry, I try to put in breaks and little jokes every now and then. That's what my wife tells me to do. But sometimes it's more effective than others. So, moving right along. The vagus nerve. So connecting this back to the gut-brain axis, if you will. All right. So the vagus nerve. Who's heard of the vagus nerve? Who's heard of cranial nerves? So the vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10. Who's heard of the enteric nervous system? Cool. Yeah, the ENS. All right. So you have your central nervous system. You have your peripheral nervous system, and you have your enteric nervous system. So basically all this to say, we have a brain here, we have a brain here. The way that they're connected is through the spine and the vagus nerve, right? So our sacral plexus, our lumbar plexus. The other connection, arguably, is like our circulation, our blood circulation, because that's how, if we have these things that are getting into our blood circulation, then they can get back up into our brain, and vice versa. So again, I'm going to really just highlight the big things here. This is all about the adherence junction, which we talked about earlier. So Zonulin, occludin are everything in black. The colors, the red, blue, and green, is the adherence junction. And this is where we talk about the cytolethal distending toxin from gram-negative bacteria. That's the CDT attacks the adherence junction, the scaffolding network. Okay? Learn more about that on the podcast. We go into Vinculin. All right, so what's Vinculin? Vinculin is a protein. It's right here. All right, and this is from Mark Pimentel, MD, from Cedars-Sinai in California. All right, Vinculin is a protein in the adherence junction. When your body forms antibodies to the CDT, all right, it cross-reacts. Who's heard of cross-reactivity? Who's heard of molecular mimicry? All right, so what's a great way to explain this? It looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. Is it really a duck? Is kind of what your body says, right? So if it looks close enough, sometimes your immune system can get confused, all right? So even though your immune system is forming antibodies to CDT, or cytolethal descending toxin, all right, your immune system thinks, because vinculin it looks so similar, it also will attack the vinculin, okay? We tracking there so far? I know this is kind of hard to understand sometimes. Not only that, but it will also attack the enteric nervous system, because the enteric nervous system looks similar to the CDT. Kind of? Maybe? Is it sinking in? All right, so now these antibodies are attacking the connection network, or the enteric nervous system, all right, and the actual nerve, which is a problem. Okay, that's not good. All right, so as a chiropractor, or as just even a general population person, what can we do to increase our vagal tone? Who's heard of our functional vagus nerve exercises? Cool, yeah. So in the same way that we can exercise a muscle, right? I can pick up a weight, a nice, kettlebell. Melissa's gonna hate me. We gotta get going. All right, I can curl a kettlebell. All right, I can press. All right, do whatever, and I can exercise skeletal muscle. I can do the same thing with nerves. All right, if I send the right signals. So we should all be doing every morning and evening, if you're really into it. Gargling. So with water is vagal. Okay, your gag reflex. All right, there's actually points in the ear that correspond to the vagus nerve. Chiropractic adjustments, very good for the vagus nerve, both the lumbar and the cervical spine. What else we got here for you? Humming or singing loudly. Who likes to sing as they're driving down the road in their car with their Spotify playlist on, listening to the Michigan Film Wellness podcast? Yes, awesome. So that's me, or if you don't play an instrument, or you play the radio in the shower, so sing along. It's very vagal. It's very good for your gut health, okay? The vagus nerve training, so our vagus nerve innervates our entire gut. All right, you name it, the vagus nerve is in play there. All right, so it's very important. Some people that don't have a gag reflex, or some people who are having a motility issue, that's frontal lobe, that's vagus nerve. You got to fix that. And the cool thing is, this stuff is free. It doesn't cost anything to, have a spoon and stick it on the back of your throat and, initiate a gag reflex. Don't do that right after you eat, though. But it is good to fire the vagus nerve. What they say is like going for a jog is like gargling for the vagus nerve, okay? Doing a push-up is like the gag reflex. So you got to do both, and you got to be kind of consistent and aggressive with them. You just can't do it once for like 5 seconds and then stop and do that one time. Just like with regular exercise, if you want to release 20 pounds, or if you want to have a healthy vagus nerve, you got to do it. We tracking? Yes, go ahead.
You can't just pick a couple of those and skip the gag?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could skip the gag reflex, a more comprehensive approach. Yeah, so the question was, can you just skip the gag reflex? It's like, sure, okay, fine. But if you want the most, it's like, can you ride a bike with one wheel? Or would you rather ride a bike with 2 wheels?
Humming, gargling sound.
Humming and gargling, yeah. I'll meet people where they're at. Whatever it takes to get people started is my whole point. So that's going to help restore that oral peripheral tolerance. I had a request, Melissa told me this, so like with the bowel sounds, this was a thing from last time I came and spoke, I guess. But you can auscultate the bowel sounds. Let's see if this will actually work here for us.
How has multiple bowel sounds on the 4 quadrants?
Just take a minute for this. Sometimes I'll do this with patients. I'm not doing this with every patient, but you can auscultate with a stethoscope the different quadrants of the gut, and you should hear a regular rhythm of gut sounds, okay? I've actually done this where I've heard nothing, and I was like, whoa, what's going on? All right, yeah, she was having a really hard time. She had to go on FODMAPs, and that really helped her. But again, it's hard to hear here. You guys can check this video out. There's all these clinical, like physical diagnosis signs of how you can listen to, but how many people have a stethoscope and how many people are listening to their gut, right? So it's not the most practical thing. Unless your primary care doc or your, holistic chiropractor is listening to your gut sounds, I feel like that's where the major application is. This is just about peristalsis motility, which we talked about, frontal lobe, vagus nerve. Something a lot of patients tell me is, you get that sensation of having to run to the bathroom because you've got to go number 2, right? But when you get there, it's kind of a disproportionate response, like not much happens, right? Who's ever had that? I've had that. All right, so it's this whole idea of, if you have this really huge sensation to go, then you should actually go when you get there, but some people don't. All right, coffee enemas come into play, magnesium, herbal laxatives, things like that. Again, this just goes back to how it's neurogenic, okay? Supplements alone will not fix a neurogenic brain-gut axis dysfunction. You have to train the brain, or that goes back to our adjustments, that goes back to our vagus nerve exercises. Okay, we can't just huperzine is fantastic for acetylcholine function, but if you're only taking huperzine and you're having these gut-brain axis dysfunctions, it's like you're only using one component of what you could be doing. Okay, neuroplasticity, so mitochondrial biogenesis, so this goes both ways. Plasticity cannot happen with supplements alone. I like this video, so this actually shows one neuron connecting to the other, which is really cool. So this goes to show how our brains, our system is plastic. Okay, we can develop things if we send the right signals. All right, so that's what I help people do. I guide them towards sending the right signals so that this can happen. Okay? And practical applications, so a lot of things we talked about already. There's reflex points on the sides of your legs if you guys are constipated at all. From your hip to your knee, rub the sides of your leg. That's really good for helping you move. And there's a lot of acupuncture points that we'll use, spinal adjustments, especially the lumbar and cervical. Who loves bitters, like really bitter food or bitter herbs to stimulate digestion? Obviously, nutritional medicines, which we talked about. Here's our vagus nerve exercises. Coffee enemas. You're seeing coffee enemas much more in the research, or if you've heard about Gerson therapy, coffee enemas are being much more substantiated in the literature as a clinical tool to help correct these reflexes here, or this dysfunction. More practical applications, probiotics, fiber, fermented foods, vagus. Aromatherapy is huge. What's cool about aromatherapy? It goes right in the brain. It doesn't synapse in the thalamus, so it's a unique pathway, right? I like things that are unique, all right? Avoiding bone broth is excellent, getting good sleep, avoiding GMOs, chiropractic adjustments, yearly or bi-yearly cleansing. And like I said, I know we are kind of rushing through because we are just about at our time here. Again, this is what we do, guys, at the Michigan Family Wellness Clinic. For those of you who walked in a little bit later, we are located in Canton, and we specialize in the artful spinal chiropractic adjustment combined with lifestyle nutritional medicine so that we can help people become more resilient, adapt to their stress, and restore them back to health. That being said, if you guys are interested in a new patient appointment, so because you attended for today, if you want to go online to our website, michiganfamilywellness.com, you can schedule an online appointment, and if you do so, you can schedule for the future, obviously. But if you schedule that appointment today before midnight tonight, we'll actually discount that new patient appointment down to what you see right down here. So as long as you schedule online before midnight tonight, we can help you out with a cost savings there.
Mike, a minute.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, that was great. Too bad we don't live in Canton.
That's right, yeah.
I'm around, and this is just to help with costs. If you have any money you want to put in, it's fine. It's not necessary, though. So I'm going to let it go. Also, if you have any questions for Dr. Carl, that was a lot of information. Sorry about the mic. I think you have to stand over here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We're too close. We're gonna ask whatever questions we have to Dr. Counts, and he will, of course, give us a brilliant answer.
I'll try. Also, Melissa has a podcast. For those of you who know Melissa Malinowski, who is a local naturopath here in Grand Rapids, you can check her episode out on the podcast as well. So, yes. So that's pretty much it here, guys. Thanks a lot for coming out. Like Diane said, the milk jug is going around. It's great to come back out to the chapter here. I was out here, I think, a couple of years ago. I don't think it was, I have to double check the emails, but I always enjoy coming out. I'm a Grand Valley grad, so it's kind of like coming back home. I lived out here for a few years, and my sister went there as well. So I have some ties to, Allendale and Grand Rapids and all that. But gosh, that was like 10 years ago now, so it's been a minute. But I love doing this stuff, so
How did
you guys,
get started?
How did I get started?
Yeah.
So I was in Grand Valley doing music actually, so career change. Played the trumpet for a while, got a music degree. From there, I had a lot of soft tissue therapy done on my psoas and my diaphragm, and I was like, this stuff is really cool, like just manual body work. So I went into massage therapy, then into chiropractic, and now that's where I practice, is on the east side of the state. Just adjusting people and helping them with their functional health. And I love this component of autoimmune. The autoimmune model, it makes a ton of sense to me, and I get a lot of good results with it. And so if people are willing to do the testing, because I'll be honest, well, a couple thoughts here. The test is just the test. The test is not the treatment, okay? So there's cost for the test, and then there's more cost for the treatment, all right? So there's a little bit of logistics here, but for the people who want to see it on paper, on purpose, and they don't want to, circle the drain anymore, we offer this to them. I have an NPI number. I can equip them with the blood testing. They can go right through the office. I don't charge extra for it. I just say, look, it's the cost of the test. Obviously, if you have a consultation, it's my time, but I'm not like upcharging the cost of the test just so they can have access to it.
For the Cyrex Labs test?
Yeah, for the Cyrex test. This is Array 2, by the way, we've been talking about. Array 2, is it okay if I say? $195 is the cost for Array 2. And there's a lot of arrays. There's like 20 of them. There's a lot of arrays that you can do. This is just one that we've talked about, so I could do like 20 talks about. So Cyrex is Cyrex. Yeah.
You say array?
Yeah, that's just the name of the test that they call it, like test number 2 or array number 2.
Insurance doesn't cover that. Yeah.
So you can use your HSA if you have an HSA or an FSA, to my knowledge. You can use your HSA online. I've had patients do that. So a health savings account, flex spend account, these are becoming more popular, for example, like with the higher deductible plan. So even patients that come to our office for their chiropractic care, they'll use their HSA or their FSA to cover the cost of their chiropractic adjustments, because chiropractic care is a qualified medical expense under those policies. But to your point, otherwise it is an out-of-pocket expense. The codes, they do have the codes. If you want to submit the codes to your insurance, they can give you all of the codes, all of the CPT codes, all of the ICD-10 codes, and you can self-submit for a reimbursement.
Some of those studies that you quoted,
Yeah.
they've been replicated. I
Have they
know
been?
People, I don't know. I know that
Mhm.
studies.
Sure. So the question is, have these studies been replicated?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
I'm wondering. I guess I'm wondering how. What are they a respectable journal? Where are these coming from? Are they replicated?
Sure. So if the question is, have these studies been replicated, I can say, to my knowledge, they have not. In terms of like any of the specific studies mentioned here, I don't think they're trying to reproduce. Now, if you're talking about peer review articles, absolutely. Like there's been other references in peer review articles. Are these sources credible? That might be to the eye of the beholder, if you will. I consider, gastroenterology, I consider, Nature, these immunology journals to be pretty reputable sources versus like someone's blog post, random person,
Yeah.
XYZ. Does that make sense? And if it's in PubMed, in my opinion, it's pretty legit. Obviously, you got to read things to make sure you're getting good
I've been
research.
reading
But
about leaky gut syndrome
Yeah.
for blood
Sure.
brain for years and
Mhm.
years and years.
yeah, like I said, this stuff is not necessarily new.
I always thought it was pretty controversial, though. I don't know if it still is. I
Sure.
don't know.
Yeah.
I've not read much about it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I guess the question is, does it exist or not? I would say absolutely it exists. But we're understanding more about it now based on this new testing that's been available for the past few years here now. How long has Array 2 been around?
So maybe a better question is
Mhm.
what's your success ratio? Like, how's this working for you?
Yeah.
People are getting Cyrex Labs testing, you tell them what to eat.
Yeah.
and
So
you
compliance
think
is
it's
always a
fair,
thing.
but-
If I had patients that were just doing everything I said all the time, then that would be awesome. You get 100% compliance, but I can tell you that when you get these lab test results back and then you have that consultation with the patient and you start implementing some of these treatments, especially those immunoglobulins, the SBI that we talked about, and they start feeling better and the depression starts to go away. And for some people, Jeff, it's just like, can we move the needle? Can we just have something get better? So if we're just improving quality of life, to me, that's a win. And if that costs, $100 for a thing of SBI to have them drink every day, to me, that's worth it.
$100 a day?
I'm sorry, not a day. $100 for the product, if you're taking the big one.
In what cases would you recommend the SBI Protect? And then what are you seeing, like symptom-wise before?
Let's see, if I can go back to it here.
What was the question?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but in what cases would we recommend the SBI Protect?
Yes.
Based on our context here? So if we can go back to let's see if it's, Vinculin, here we go. Yeah, so for example, I'm looking at a lot of these type things down here where you have positive results for all three.
I can't see it.
I'm sorry, yeah, so it's like LPS is coming back out of range, zonulin occludin is coming back out of range, and actomycin is coming back out of range. Then yeah, I'd be using SBI definitely there. I struggle to even say this is where I would not use SBI. Now I will say this, going back to Dr. Elroy Vojdani, so I consulted with him about a case, and he said, before you do the SBI, before you use the immunoglobulins, use your glutamine, use your digestive enzymes, use your probiotics, do all that for about a month first, as like a phase 1. And then phase 2, use the SBI. And I think that's just clinical experience coming from him in terms of effectiveness there. Does that kind of answer the question or speak to it?
I use it in my practice all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how you are seeing.
Sure.
Are you seeing results? What are you seeing before and after?
So that pattern I just described, like phase 1 with your probiotics, your digestive enzymes, your glutamines, and then phase 2 with the SBI, that's what I've seen results with. Yep.
So phase 1 would be glutamine, digestives, and probiotics?
Yeah, as an example, just all of the things that heal the gut, right? So your glutamine, your amino acids, your digestive enzymes, all of your ACEs, your lipases, your amylases, your cellulases, all those kinds of things, even stomach acids, so your hydrochloric acids. A good probiotic is really good here. And then doing that for a couple of weeks. And again, it's tough to say protocols because every patient is different. So I'm always communicating with people hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And we gauge and we titrate and we change and adjust things as they go. So.
Do you tell people that, do you do this without eliminating, if you know
Great question.
there's a histamine involved,
Sure.
would that be part of that phase 1?
Yeah, definitely. So following, any kind of an elimination diet, so I'm, just get rid of all the inflammatory proteins.
AIP?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So get rid of gluten, get rid of soy, dairy, I don't even care. Get rid of it and eat as clean as possible while you're doing this, and then slowly we can talk about starting to reintroduce those foods. Yeah, good question.
So how, and then do you see that people can go back into eating everything typically, or not really? What is your
Sure.
experience with
Sure.
that?
That goes back to I was telling Jeff in terms of compliance and how long you can drag it out, because everyone wants the quick fix, right? So it's some of these programs might take a month, 2 months, some time.
I guess I'm kind of saying, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
Can we not tolerate gluten because of all the environmental triggers? And does that matter, really? What's the source?
Yeah, so let's ask Melissa when the gluten talk is.
Oh, okay.
So that might be a whole nother talk. But I would say briefly, 2 things. I agree with you in terms of the environmental triggers, the loss of oral tolerance, the loss of peripheral tolerance involved. The other thing is, I have patients where it's they can go to Europe or anywhere else, Australia in the world, they can have, the baguettes and everything and the breads, and they come here and then they get sick, but they can have it over there. So there's definitely, our food has changed in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. The other thing, to kind of speak to your question, is ideally, it'd be wonderful to, test this originally and get these results back, implement treatments and programs and protocols, and then retest 6 months later, 12 months later. Because it'd be wonderful to see the change on paper on purpose. To really be like, okay, well, let's try and have that piece of cheese again now.
Yeah.
After a year's gone by.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of swinging in the dark.
Right.
And using diagnosis as a starting point, a launching point, not
Sure.
as.
Which is a great point too. The assessment form that you guys have in front of you, this is a great way, again, this is subjective, this is just, hey, how do you feel? But it's free, it doesn't cost anything. It's not going to cost $195 to fill a form. But I like starting here with a lot of patients because it gets them thinking. It gets them like, hey, what's going on? And then with this form specifically, it really dials us into like, okay, what organ system is not really functioning right? And how can we help that in the short term? Again, just moving the needle, helping that person feel better and function better and interface with food better. And it's a great starting point. So if you guys have that, like I said, fill it out. Send it back to me, either email or text it with a photo, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. Other questions?
Did you say you would make the notes or the...
Yeah, we can send out, if you're on the meetup page or you're on the email list, we can email the presentation. I think we even have some audio notes if you'd like. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, are you familiar at all with abdominal massage helping with vagal tone?
Oh, great. Yeah. Let's go back to that. So visceral adjustments, as I like to call them, visceral somatic adjustments. So I'm a huge fan of applied kinesiology, Dr. George Goodhart, the old school guys from like the 60s. And so I like to check a lot of things when it comes to hiatal hernia, ileocecal valve, valve to Houston, all these cool things. And so for the patients who are willing to let me kind of, quote unquote, poke around in their gut, I do like to do a lot of this stuff, all right? So sometimes you can have an open or a closed ileocecal valve. Sometimes your stomach can be up above your diaphragm, causing dysfunction. Sometimes you can just be locked up with your valves of Houston, and things aren't moving well. I got this patient in particular. I could talk for hours about that, but it's like we have all these fascial restrictions and things get tight in our guts, and the expression is polar and gooey. So we have to be gooey. All right, you can be muscular, you can be jacked, you can be whatever, but it's like you should be soft and pliable. Like I should be able to, get in there and kind of work around without pain. But if you're hard as a rock, if you're, a brick wall, that's not necessarily a good thing because that's how our body communicates, like electrically, right? So yeah, if that answers your question, yes, we do a lot of that. Again, some people are just like, look, doc, just crack my back. I'm like, okay, fine. Or some people are like, look, doc, I don't want you to touch my spine at all. I only want you to tell me what to take for nutritional medicines. So I meet people where they're at, but obviously I advocate for the combination of the two.
This cleansing, detoxing thing, I
sure.
went to the West Michigan,
Okay.
West and A Price in Muskegon where I live.
Yeah.
And somebody was talking there about like a colon cleanse. What do you think about that? I've never even heard of that, but they wanted to do like a colon cleanse.
Sure.
Colon cleanse.
Okay, I'm gonna, I think we should all talk to Dr. Kyle individually now, because we're gonna start closing up. So, let's give him a big hand and clap.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for coming out. Appreciate it.
And he'll be around for a few minutes, and you can ask him your questions. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cleansing is great. I mean, my philosophy is like the right time, the right level, the right sequence. So people can overdo it, people can underdo it. You got to be careful with it, right? Yeah.
I was to see aromatherapy up there.
Aromatherapy?
What scents
Oh, yeah.
use for this?
So essential oils, aromatherapy? Yeah. So there's no synapse with the thalamus. So like sight, taste, touch, hearing, all these other senses, they synapse with the thalamus first. So olfaction goes right up into your brain, which is why, like for me, like I would go down into someone's basement and I'd be like, this smells like grandma's basement. But I would have that thought before I really even thought of it. Does that make sense? So olfaction goes right up into your frontal lobe, which is why it's really cool as a pathway for healing.
So which do you use? Like
Frankincense is great. I'm not an aromatherapy expert. You know, talk to your local doTERRA Young Living person, right? So, but frankincense is great. You know, lemon, lavender, peppermint. You know, smell the clean stuff, right? Because again, it's going right up into your brain. So you don't want to like get a really cheap oil and, you know, start inhaling it or diffusing it. Bottoms of your feet is really safe. They talk about that all the time. I like, what do I like? Tea tree. Tea tree like gets my brain all thinking. Yeah. You have a favorite?
I like lavender at night.
Lavender? Yeah, lavender at night. Yeah.
The little one, the doTERRA.
Yep, yep, the roll-ons, yeah. Rosemary. There you go. Cool. Yeah, there's lots of good ones. I think Melissa knows a lot about that too. So,
Yeah,
cool.
the oils time and modulate the limbic system about 20 seconds just by inhaling. You can keep talking.
Oh, okay.
But just a releasing travel.
Totally good. Yeah. That whole, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Sure. Right.
Oh, you can use them topically for sure. I temples, neck, earlobes.
Oh, sure. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Vitality oils. They're just another piece of.
Thanks again for coming out. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I know there's a lot to write down. So we'll send those out for sure. Great to see you. Absolutely. Let's catch up again sometime. Cool. For sure. Hi. Okay, right on. Yeah, very good. Oh, there you go. I'm just Michigan Family Wellness. So there you go, West Michigan. I do not think I know it specifically. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. Okay. Very good. Nice. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.